What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved comedic actors walks into what should be a simple morning talk show appearance, only to find himself facing a host determined to tear him down on live television? In just 37 seconds, a respected television personality would go from smiling host to losing complete control, and what followed became one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. Eugene Levy sat down on the bright sofa of Lorraine Kelly's morning show expecting the usual lighthearted banter about his latest project. The audience was buzzing with excitement. After all, this was Eugene Levy, the man who had brought laughter to millions through his incredible career. Beside him on the panel sat regular contributors Sarah Thompson and Marcus Webb, both looking eager to chat with the comedy legend. Lorraine Kelly opened with what seemed like a standard question. "So Eugene, you've been in the business for quite some time now. Tell us, do you ever feel like you're just playing the same character over and over again?" The question landed with an uncomfortable thud. Eugene shifted slightly in his seat, maintaining his signature composure. "Well, I think every actor brings something of themselves to their roles. I try to find the truth in each character I play." But Lorraine wasn't satisfied with that answer. She leaned forward, her smile tightening. "Yes, but let's be honest. You do tend to play the anxious, nervous type quite a bit, don't you? Some might say it's become a bit predictable." Sarah Thompson's eyes widened. She glanced at Marcus, who looked equally uncomfortable. The atmosphere in the studio shifted instantly. Eugene remained calm, his voice measured. "I suppose audiences respond to authenticity. If something works and people connect with it, I don't see that as a problem." "Connect with it or are just used to it?" Lorraine shot back. "I mean, when was the last time you really challenged yourself as an actor?" The audience fell silent. This wasn't the friendly morning chat they'd expected. Marcus Webb tried to interject, attempting to steer the conversation toward Eugene's recent work. "I think what's remarkable about Eugene's career is the longevity and consistency." But Lorraine cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Marcus, please, I'm asking Eugene about growth as an artist. Surely after all these years, there must be some regret about not pushing yourself into more dramatic territory, more serious roles." Eugene's jaw tightened slightly, though his voice remained steady. "I'm quite proud of the work I've done. Comedy is serious work. It requires just as much skill and dedication as any dramatic role." "Does it, though?" Lorraine pressed, her tone dripping with condescension. "I mean, making funny faces and delivering one-liners compared to the depth required for true dramatic acting? Surely you can see the difference?" Sarah Thompson looked horrified. "Lorraine, I don't think that's fair to say." "Fair?" Lorraine turned to Sarah with irritation. "I'm simply asking questions that I think our audience wants answers to. We're all thinking it, aren't we? When will Eugene Levy show us he can do more than just comedy?" Eugene sat back, studying Lorraine carefully. "I'm not sure what you want me to say. Are you suggesting my entire body of work is somehow less valuable because it's made people laugh?" "I'm suggesting," Lorraine continued, her voice rising slightly, "that perhaps you've taken the easy route. Comedy is safe. It's comfortable. Real actors take risks." The insult hung in the air like smoke. Marcus Webb shook his head in disbelief. "Lorraine, that's completely out of line. Eugene has won multiple awards for his work." "Awards that celebrate comedy," Lorraine said dismissively. "Not exactly the same caliber as dramatic achievement, is it?" Eugene's expression hardened. For the first time, a flash of genuine frustration crossed his face. "I think you're confusing your personal preferences with objective measures of talent and achievement." "Oh, am I?" Lorraine leaned back with a smug expression. "Or am I just willing to say what others won't? That maybe, just maybe, you've been coasting on the same shtick for decades?" Sarah Thompson stood up slightly from her seat. "This is unacceptable. Eugene came here as a guest, and you're treating him with complete disrespect." "Sit down, Sarah," Lorraine snapped. "I'm conducting this interview." Eugene raised a hand calmly. "No, Sarah's right. This isn't an interview. This is something else entirely. He turned to look directly at Lorraine. I've been doing this long enough to know when someone has an agenda. What exactly is your problem with me? I don't have a problem, Lorraine insisted, though her defensive tone suggested otherwise. I'm simply trying to have an honest conversation about your limitations as a performer. My limitations? Eugene's voice remained controlled, but there was steel underneath now. You invite me onto your show, and instead of discussing my work or my current project, you spend the entire time trying to diminish my career? Marcus Webb nodded vigorously. She's been hostile from the moment you sat down, Eugene. We all saw it. Lorraine's face flushed red. I am not being hostile. I am being honest. Maybe you're just not used to being challenged. Challenged? Eugene let out a short, humorless laugh. There's a difference between challenging someone and being deliberately insulting. You've crossed that line multiple times in the last few minutes. Well, if you can't handle a few tough questions, Lorraine said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, then maybe you're proving my point about taking the easy route. Sarah Thompson gasped audibly. That's enough. This has gone way too far. Eugene stood up slowly, removing his microphone with deliberate care. You know what? I don't need to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly has their own issues to work through. Oh, so you're walking out, Lorraine's voice pitched higher. How very mature of you. Yes, I'm walking out, Eugene said calmly, placing the microphone on the coffee table. Because I respect myself too much to stay somewhere I'm not respected. That's not immaturity. That's self-worth. Marcus stood as well, offering his hand to Eugene. You're absolutely right to leave. This has been appalling. Lorraine stood up, her composure cracking. You can't just walk off my show. Who do you think you are? Eugene turned back to face her, his expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve. I'm someone who spent 40 years in this industry, treating people with dignity and respect. I'm someone who understands that success isn't measured by tearing others down. And I'm someone who knows when it's time to leave. This is ridiculous, Lorraine sputtered, looking to her producers off camera. Are we really going to let him just walk off? Sarah Thompson picked up her own things. Actually, Lorraine, I think I'm done here too. This isn't what I signed up for. Sarah, sit down, Lorraine commanded. You're under contract. Contract or not, Sarah replied firmly. I won't be part of ambushing a guest like this. Marcus Webb remained standing as well, arms crossed. You owe Eugene an apology. What you did here was unprofessional and cruel. Lorraine's face was now completely red, her voice shaking with anger and embarrassment. I don't owe anyone anything. If he can't handle a real conversation, that's his problem, not mine. Eugene paused at the edge of the set, turning one last time. A real conversation involves mutual respect and good faith. What happened here was neither. I hope you take some time to think about why you felt the need to attack me today. Attack you? Lorraine's voice reached a shrill pitch. You're being overly sensitive. This is what happens when people are used to being treated like royalty all the time. You can't handle one person being honest with you. Honest? Eugene shook his head sadly. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Honesty doesn't require cruelty. Honesty doesn't require putting someone down to make yourself feel important. The audience, which had been silent throughout most of the exchange, began to murmur. Several people could be heard expressing support for Eugene. Lorraine looked around wildly, suddenly aware that the room had turned against her. Oh, so now everyone's on his side? Typical. No one wants to hear the truth. The truth? Marcus Webb spoke up, his voice filled with disgust. The truth is, you invited a respected guest onto your show and then spent the entire time trying to humiliate him. That's not journalism. That's not entertainment. That's just mean. Spirited. Eugene nodded toward Marcus and Sarah. Thank you both for speaking up. That took courage. Then he looked at Lorraine one more time. I hope your next guest is treated better than I was. With that, Eugene Levy walked off the set, with his head held high, his dignity intact despite Lorraine's best efforts to strip it away. Lorraine stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find words. The crew was silent. Sarah and Marcus remained standing, their body language making it clear they were not going to continue participating in the show either. Well, Lorraine finally managed, her voice brittle and defensive. I suppose that's what happens when people can't handle genuine critique. We'll be right back after this break. But the damage was done. As the camera continued to roll for a few more seconds before cutting away, Lorraine's expression showed something beyond anger. There was confusion there, and perhaps the first hints of realization that she had made a terrible mistake. Sarah Thompson leaned over to Marcus and whispered, just loud enough to be picked up by the microphones, I can't believe that just happened. He handled it with such grace. Marcus nodded. He's a class act, more than can be said for some people. Lorraine heard the comment and spun around. If you two have something to say it to my face. Sarah met her gaze steadily. We just did, for the last 10 minutes. But you weren't listening. You were too busy trying to tear down someone who's achieved more in his career than most people dream of. How dare you? Lorraine began, but Marcus cut her off. No, how dare you? Eugene came here in good faith. He's a guest, and you treated him like an enemy. For what? To prove some point? To make yourself look tough? Lorraine's hands were shaking now. I was doing my job. I was asking real questions. Real questions? Sarah's voice was incredulous. You told him comedy wasn't real acting. You dismissed his entire career. You mocked his choices. Those weren't questions. Those were attacks. A producer approached, trying to intervene. Let's all take a breath and calm down. But Sarah wasn't finished. I've been on this panel for 3 years. I've never seen you treat a guest like that. Never. And for it to be Eugene Levy, of all people, someone who's beloved by millions, someone who's known for being kind and professional, it's shameful. Lorraine's eyes were glistening now, though whether from anger or the beginnings of tears, it was impossible to tell. He embarrassed me by walking off. No, Marcus said firmly. You embarrassed yourself by making him feel he had no other choice. He gave you multiple chances to change direction. He stayed calm and respectful, even when you were being awful. And when it became clear you weren't going to stop, he left with dignity. That's on you, not him. The producer tried again. We need to prep for the next segment. There might not be a next segment, Sarah said, looking at Lorraine directly. At least not with me on it. I need to think about whether I want to be associated with this show after today. Lorraine's facade finally cracked completely. You're all overreacting. It was just a spirited debate. A debate? Marcus laughed bitterly. A debate implies two people engaging on equal terms with mutual respect. What we witnessed was a host abusing her position of power to belittle a guest. There's a word for that, and it's not debate. The studio had cleared out significantly by now. Crew members who weren't essential had found reasons to be elsewhere. The tension was suffocating. Lorraine sank back into her chair, the fight seeming to drain out of her. I was just trying to ask tough questions. That's what I'm supposed to do. There's a difference between tough questions and personal attacks, Sarah said, her voice softer now, but still firm. Asking about his creative process, or his choices, is fine. Telling him his life's work is inferior, and that he's been coasting. That's not journalism. That's cruelty. Marcus added, and the way you dismissed us when we tried to redirect the conversation? That showed this wasn't about getting interesting answers for your audience. This was personal for you. It wasn't personal, Lorraine protested weakly, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. Then what was it? Sarah asked. Because from where we were sitting, it looked like you decided before he even sat down that you were going to go after him. Why? Lorraine didn't answer. She stared at her hands, her earlier aggression completely deflated. The producer spoke quietly to Lorraine. We're going to need to figure out how to address this. The phones are already lighting up. Address what? Lorraine asked, but there was no real fight left in her voice. The fact that one of the most respected actors in comedy just walked off your show because you spent 10 minutes insulting him, the producer said bluntly. This is going to be everywhere. Sarah gathered her notes. I'm going to go. I need some air. Marcus followed suit. Same here. Lorraine, I really hope you take some time to reflect on what happened here today, because that was not okay. As they left, Lorraine sat alone on the bright sofa, surrounded by empty seats and the weight of what she'd done. The lights that had seemed so warm and inviting at the start of the show now felt harsh and exposing. A young production assistant approached hesitantly. Miss Kelly, they're asking if you want to record a statement for the next segment. Lorraine looked up, her eyes unfocused. A statement? What would I even say? The assistant shifted uncomfortably. Maybe an apology? An apology, Lorraine repeated flatly. For what? For doing my job? The assistant didn't respond, but her expression said everything. Even the youngest member of the team knew what had happened wasn't right. Lorraine stood abruptly. I need a few minutes alone. As she walked off set toward her dressing room, the studio felt cavernous and empty. Behind her, crew members began quietly discussing what they'd witnessed, their voices low, but their opinions clear. In the hallway, Sarah and Marcus stood talking with other staff members. Did you see his face when she said comedy wasn't real acting? One of them asked. Sarah nodded. He handled it better than I would have. I wanted to throw something at her. The audience was on his side the whole time, Marcus observed. You could feel the room turning against her with every word. Good, Sarah said firmly. She deserved it. Nobody should be treated like that, but especially not someone who came here as a guest, expecting a normal interview. Back in her dressing room, Lorraine stared at her reflection in the mirror. The confident host who'd started the show looked back at her, but something had changed. The certainty was gone, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like doubt. Her phone was buzzing constantly. She turned it face down, not ready to see the messages flooding in. A knock on the door. Her executive producer entered without waiting for permission. We need to talk about damage control, he said, his voice tense. I know, Lorraine said quietly. Do you? Because Eugene Levy is trending right now, and not in a good way for us. People are calling for your head. Lorraine closed her eyes. It wasn't supposed to go like that. Then how was it supposed to go? The producer demanded. Because from where I was standing, it went exactly how you planned it. You came in with an agenda, and you executed it. The problem is, it backfired spectacularly. I thought I was being provocative, Lorraine admitted. Asking questions no one else would ask. There's a reason no one else asks those questions, the producer said harshly. Because they're insulting and unprofessional. You didn't expose anything about Eugene Levy except that he has more class in his little finger than most people have in their entire body. What you exposed was your own lack of judgment. The words hit hard. Lorraine had no defense left. We're going to have to issue a statement, the producer continued, and it's going to have to be a real apology, not some half measure about misunderstandings. I understand, Lorraine said, her voice barely above a whisper. Meanwhile, word of what happened had spread through the building. In the green room where guests waited before appearing on the show, the next scheduled guest was having second thoughts. I'm not going on after that, they told their publicist firmly. Did you see what she did to Eugene Levy? I'm not putting myself in that position. The publicist was already on the phone, making excuses to the producers. It wasn't just the next guest. By the end of the day, 3 other scheduled appearances had been quietly canceled. Nobody wanted to be Lorraine Kelly's next target. In the control room, staff members were already pulling together the footage, knowing it would need to be reviewed extensively. Some were making copies for themselves, sensing this was going to be a defining moment in television history. "Play it back," one of them said. "From the beginning." They watched in silence as the interview unfolded again on the monitors. Seeing it a second time made it even more striking how patient Eugene had been, how many opportunities he'd given Lorraine to change course, and how stubbornly she'd refused. "He tried so hard to keep it professional," someone observed. "And she just kept pushing," another added. "It's like she wanted him to walk off." "Maybe she did," a third person suggested. "Maybe she thought it would make great television." "Well, it did make great television," the first person said. "Just not the way she hoped." Back on set, preparations were being made to continue the show, but the energy was completely different. Staff moved mechanically through their tasks, the usual cheerful banter replaced by tense silence. Sarah Thompson returned briefly to collect her belongings. A makeup artist approached her. "Is it true you're quitting?" they asked quietly. Sarah hesitated. "I don't know yet. But I know I can't come back tomorrow and pretend this didn't happen." "A lot of us are talking about the same thing," the makeup artist confided. "What she did today, it changed how we see her." Sarah nodded slowly. "It changed how I see this whole show. I thought we were here to celebrate people, to have fun conversations, to make mornings a little brighter for viewers, not to tear down guests for sport." The makeup artist squeezed her arm supportively before walking away. Marcus found Sarah in the hallway. "You okay?" "Not really," she admitted. "I keep replaying it in my head. All the moments where we could have stopped it, should have said more, done more." "We did what we could," Marcus said. "We spoke up. We supported Eugene. And we made it clear we didn't agree with what was happening. That's not nothing." "I know," Sarah said. "But I wish I'd been stronger. Louder." "You were plenty strong," Marcus assured her. "And trust me, Lorraine heard every word. She just chose to ignore it." They stood in silence for a moment, processing everything. "Do you think she'll apologize?" Sarah finally asked. Marcus considered. "I think she'll be forced to. Whether she means it is another question entirely." "Eugene deserves a real apology," Sarah said firmly. "Eugene deserves a lot of things," Marcus agreed. "Respect, appreciation, an acknowledgement that what happened was wrong. Whether he'll get any of that from Lorraine remains to be seen." The show did eventually continue, but it was a shadow of its usual self. Lorraine went through the motions, reading from the teleprompter with none of her usual energy. The audience could feel the difference. The magic was gone, replaced by an awkwardness that hung over everything. When the show finally ended, Lorraine retreated immediately to her dressing room. She knew she'd have to face the music eventually, but for now, she just wanted to be alone with the reality of what she'd done. Eugene Levy, meanwhile, had left the building with his head held high. He'd been in the industry long enough to know that sometimes the best response is simply to walk away with dignity. He didn't need to justify himself or explain his choices. His body of work spoke for itself. As news of the incident spread, reactions poured in from across the entertainment industry. Fellow actors, comedians, and colleagues all expressed support for Eugene and criticism of how he'd been treated. But Eugene himself remained silent, refusing to add fuel to the fire. He'd said what needed to be said in the moment, and that was enough. Back at the studio, the reality was sinking in for everyone involved. This wasn't just a bad day that would be forgotten. This was a moment that would define the show, the host, and everyone who'd been part of it. The question now was what would come next. Would there be accountability? Would lessons be learned? Would anything actually change? For Eugene Levy, those questions didn't matter. He'd made his choice, stood up for himself, and walked away from a situation that didn't serve him. That was all he needed to do. For Lorraine Kelly and her show, however, the consequences were just beginning. The phones wouldn't stop ringing. The social media wouldn't stop buzzing. The questions wouldn't stop coming. And at the center of it all was one undeniable truth. A respected guest had been treated with such disrespect that he felt he had no choice but to leave. Everything else that followed stemmed from that single, crucial failure. The bright sofa where it had all unfolded sat empty now, a silent witness to one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. The lights still shone, the cameras still stood ready, but something fundamental had changed. Trust, once broken, is hard to repair. And on this day, in front of cameras and a live audience, trust had been shattered completely.